Theron's gentle oar. In the quiet embrace of a fjord nestled deep within the northern lands, where the mountains rose like ancient, watchful giants and the sea whispered secrets against the shore, lived a Viking unlike any other. His name was Theron, and while his kin were known for their fierce spirits and their longships that cut through waves like hungry wolves, Theron's heart beat to a different rhythm. He was a man of unusual gentleness, his hands more accustomed to carving intricate patterns into driftwood than wielding an axe, his voice softer than the rustle of autumn leaves. Theron's village, called Fjordheim, was small and often overlooked by the grander, more ambitious settlements. Its people were hardy, but they valued peace and the quiet industry of fishing and farming. It was here that Theron, from a young age, felt a yearning not for the glory of battle or the spoils of raid, but for connection, for understanding, and for the simple exchange of stories and goods. He spent his youth learning the ways of the sea, not with the intent to conquer, but to traverse. He studied the stars, not for navigation to distant shores of plunder, but to find paths to new friends. His longship, a vessel of exquisite craftsmanship, was named the Peace Weaver. Unlike the sleek, dragon-headed ships of other jarls, the Peace Weaver bore a carved dove at its prow, its wings outstretched in a gesture of welcome. Its sails, woven by the women of Fjordheim from the finest flax, were dyed a soft, muted blue, like the twilight sky over calm waters. There were no racks of shields along its sides, no menacing spears pointing skyward. Instead, its hold was filled with finely crafted wooden bowls, warm woolen cloaks, cured fish, and the sweet, amber honey from Fjordheim's own hives. Most importantly, it carried Theron's most cherished cargo, a collection of tales, songs, and riddles, gathered from his elders and polished by his own quiet imagination. The decision to embark on his first true voyage was met with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in Fjordheim. "What will you seek, Theron?" his uncle, a grizzled fisherman named Kale, had asked, his brow furrowed. "There is no glory in trading honey for furs, no renown in sharing old women's tales." Theron had simply smiled, a gentle, knowing light in his eyes. "I seek not glory, uncle, but understanding. I wish to know the people who live beyond our fjords, to share our bounty, and to learn from theirs. Perhaps," he added, looking out at the shimmering expanse of the sea, "there is a different kind of strength in peace." And so, one crisp morning, as the first rays of the sun painted the mountain peaks in hues of rose and gold, Theron untied the Peace Weaver from its moorings. A small crowd from Fjordheim gathered on the shore, their farewells a quiet murmur rather than a boisterous cheer. Theron stood at the helm, his hand resting on the smooth, worn wood, a sense of calm purpose settling over him. With a gentle push of the oar, the Peace Weaver glided silently out of the fjord, leaving the familiar shores behind. His first destination was the Misty Isles, a cluster of small, rocky outcrops rumored to be perpetually shrouded in a soft, ethereal fog. Navigating them was said to be treacherous, a task only for the most seasoned and daring sailors. Yet, Theron approached with a quiet confidence, relying on the ancient star charts his grandmother had taught him and the subtle shifts in the wind that whispered secrets of the sea. For 3 days and 3 nights, the Peace Weaver cut through the waves, a solitary blue shadow against the vastness. The sea was mostly calm, a gentle rocking motion that lulled the spirit. Theron spent his time mending a tear in a sail, polishing his wooden wares, and practicing the melodies on his bone flute, its notes carrying softly over the water. He ate simple meals of dried fish and berries, finding contentment in the solitude and the rhythmic creak of the ship. On the 4th morning, a thick, pearlescent mist descended, swallowing the horizon. It was the legendary fog of the Misty Isles. Theron slowed the Peace Weaver, relying entirely on his senses. He could hear the distant cry of gulls, the faint scent of damp earth and pine, and the subtle change in the water's current. He listened, truly listened, to the whispers of the sea. Hours passed, the mist clinging to the ship like a soft shroud. Just as a hint of anxiety began to stir within him, a faint, rhythmic sound reached his ears, the gentle lapping of waves against a shore, closer than he expected. He guided the Peace Weaver towards the sound, and slowly, like a dream emerging from sleep, a small, rocky cove appeared. A few simple huts, built from driftwood and turf, clung to the shore. Smoke curled lazily from their roofs, and the scent of wood smoke mingled with the salty air. A small group of people, their faces weathered by sun and wind, stood by the water's edge, watching the Peace Weaver approach. They carried no weapons, only fishing nets and curious expressions. Theron brought his ship to a gentle halt, the dove at its prow seeming to nod a greeting. He raised an open hand, a gesture of peace. "Greetings," he called out, his voice calm and clear. "I am Theron of Fjordheim. I come in peace, seeking trade and friendship." A tall, elderly woman, her hair braided with shells, stepped forward. "We are the people of Ethelgard," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Few ships find our shores, and fewer still come without swords." "My only sword is kindness," Theron said, stepping onto the shore. "And my only shield, understanding." He offered a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a common symbol of peace in his village. The woman, whose name was Alara, took the carving, her fingers tracing its smooth lines. She looked into Theron's eyes, searching, and seemed to find what she sought. "Welcome, Theron of Fjordheim," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Come, share our hearth." Over the next few days, Theron became a quiet presence in Ethelgard. He traded his honey for their dried fish and their unique, iridescent shells. He offered his woolen cloaks in exchange for their sturdy, waterproof leather. But more than goods, he shared stories. He told them of the towering mountains of Fjordheim, of the salmon runs in spring, and of the wisdom of his elders. He spoke of the gentle giants of the sea, the whales, and the songs they sang. In return, the people of Ethelgard shared their own tales, of navigating the treacherous mists, of the spirits that guarded their sacred springs, and of the stars that guided them through the darkest nights. Theron listened with genuine interest, his quiet demeanor encouraging them to open up. He learned of their unique weaving techniques, their methods for preserving food, and their deep respect for the sea. One evening, as the mist swirled around the huts and the fire crackled in the communal longhouse, Theron played his bone flute. The melodies were simple, haunting, and deeply soothing. The children of Ethelgard, usually restless, sat entranced, their eyes wide. Even the adults, who had initially been wary, found themselves lulled into a state of quiet contemplation. When it was time to depart, the people of Ethelgard gathered to bid him farewell. Alara pressed a smooth, sea-worn stone into his hand. "This stone," she said, "comes from our sacred spring. It holds the calm of these islands. May it guide your gentle path." Theron bowed his head in gratitude. As the Peace Weaver slipped back into the mist, he carried with him not just new goods, but a profound sense of connection, a quiet satisfaction that resonated deeper than any treasure. From the misty isles, Theron guided the Peace Weaver south along the coast, seeking out the smaller, less frequented settlements. His reputation, whispered from shore to shore by passing fishing boats, began to precede him. The Viking with the dove ship, they would say, who comes not for plunder, but for peace. His next stop was a small fishing village nestled in a wide bay, its houses built on stilts over the water. This was Oakhaven, and its people were known for their bountiful catches of cod and herring. As the Peace Weaver approached, a few fishing boats, their nets drying in the sun, paused their work, their occupants watching with cautious curiosity. Theron anchored the Peace Weaver a respectful distance from the shore and rowed a small dinghy to the landing. He carried a basket of freshly baked bread from Fjordheim, a rare treat in these coastal parts. "Greetings, people of Oakhaven," he called out, his voice carrying clearly over the water. "I am Theron of Fjordheim, a trader and a storyteller. I offer warm bread and peaceful intentions." A burly fisherman, his beard streaked with salt, stepped forward. "We have seen many ships, stranger," he said, his eyes narrowed, "but none like yours. What is your true purpose here?" "My purpose is as I stated," Theron replied, his gaze steady. "To exchange goods, to share tales, and to learn from your wisdom of the sea. We have honey and fine wool from our mountain folk, if you have need." The fisherman, whose name was Ragnar, eyed the bread. "Bread, you say? That is a rare commodity indeed." He gestured towards the village. "Come ashore, then. But know that our nets are sharp, and our people are wary." Theron stepped onto the creaking wooden pier, his movements unhurried. He offered the basket of bread to Ragnar, who took a loaf and broke off a piece, sniffing it cautiously before taking a bite. A look of surprise, then pleasure, spread across his face. "This is good bread," he admitted, his tone softening slightly. Over the next few days, Theron traded his bread, honey, and carved wooden tools for Oakhaven's abundant dried fish, salted cod, and sturdy fishing lines. He spent hours on the docks, observing their methods, learning about the different currents and the habits of the fish. He shared tales of the great fjords and the silent forests, and in return, the fishermen told him thrilling stories of battling giant squid and navigating treacherous storms. One evening, a young boy from Oakhaven, no older than 10, approached Theron shyly. "Master Theron," he whispered, "my grandfather, old Finn, is ill. He misses the sea, but he cannot go out. Could you tell him a story of the ocean?" Theron's heart warmed. He followed the boy to a small, quiet hut. Inside, an old man lay on a simple bed, his eyes clouded with illness. Theron sat beside him and began to speak, his voice a gentle murmur, painting vivid pictures of the vast, shimmering ocean, the playful dolphins, the silent, majestic whales, and the sun setting in a blaze of glory over the waves. He described the feeling of the wind in the sails, the salt spray on the face, the quiet joy of a bountiful catch. As Theron spoke, Finn's eyes seemed to clear, a faint smile appearing on his lips. He closed his eyes, and a peaceful sigh escaped him. The boy watched, tears welling in his eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. When Theron prepared to leave Oakhaven, Ragnar, the burly fisherman, clasped his arm. "You are a strange Viking, Theron of Fjordheim," he said, a genuine warmth in his voice. "But you are a good one. May your gentle or always find calm waters." He gave Theron a large, intricately carved fish hook, a symbol of their respect. Further south, Theron encountered a farming hamlet nestled deep within a fertile valley, far from the sea. This was Green Meadow, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the turning of the seasons and the growth of crops. The people of Green Meadow were initially even more cautious than the coastal folk, having little experience with outsiders, especially those arriving in a longship. Theron left the Peace Weaver anchored in a nearby river estuary and walked inland, carrying a small satchel of cured fish and a finely carved wooden flute. As he approached the first farmstead, a woman, her hands covered in soil, stopped her work in the fields and watched him with a wary gaze. "Greetings," Theron said, offering a small, respectful bow. "I am Theron of Fjordheim. I come from the fjords, seeking to trade and share. Do you have need of fish, or perhaps a new song for your harvest?" The woman, whose name was Gudrun, slowly lowered her hoe. "We are farmers here," she said, her voice gruff. "We know little of the sea and less of strangers. What could you possibly offer us?" "Perhaps a different perspective," Theron replied gently. "Or simply a moment of quiet exchange. We have fish, cured to last, and strong wool for your winter cloaks. And I have stories of the world beyond your valley if you care to listen." Gudrun hesitated, then gestured towards her humble home. "Come, then. We have little to offer but our hospitality." Theron spent several days in Greenmeadow. He traded his fish for their grains and vegetables, and his wool for their sturdy linen. He offered to help mend a broken fence, his strong hands working with surprising delicacy. He noticed a young boy struggling to learn a new tune on a simple reed pipe, and Theron, with infinite patience, sat with him, showing him the fingerings, his own flute singing softly in harmony. The farmers, initially reserved, slowly warmed to his quiet presence. They were fascinated by his tales of the sea, of the vastness and the mystery of the ocean. Theron, in turn, learned about their crops, their methods of tilling the soil, and their deep connection to the land. He shared songs of the mountains and fjords, and they taught him their harvest melodies, simple tunes that spoke of hard work and gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rolling hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Theron sat with the elders of Greenmeadow. "We have heard tales of Vikings," an old man named Boren said, his eyes thoughtful of their raids and their hunger for gold. "You are not like them, Theron." "No," Theron agreed, "I am not. I believe there is more value in a shared story than in stolen gold, more strength in friendship than in conquest. The world is vast, and there is enough bounty for all, if we but share it peacefully." As he departed Greenmeadow, the entire hamlet gathered to see him off. Gudrun, the woman who had first met him, pressed a small, dried flower into his hand. "This is from our fields, Theron," she said, her voice soft. "May it remind you of the peace you brought to our valley." Theron returned to the Peace Weaver, his heart full. He was not laden with gold or jewels, but with the warmth of new connections, the richness of shared experiences, and the quiet satisfaction of having sown seeds of peace. As Theron continued his gentle voyages, he inevitably encountered those who were not so readily disarmed by his peaceful intentions. One afternoon, as the Peace Weaver sailed past a rugged, forested coastline, a smaller, faster longship emerged from a hidden inlet. It was painted black, with a menacing raven's head at its prow, and its oarsmen pulled with fierce determination. This was a warship, and its crew looked every inch the formidable warriors of legend. Theron felt a familiar knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach, but he held his ground. He kept the Peace Weaver steady, its blue sails billowing gently. He ordered his single crewman, a quiet, observant young man named Arvid, to keep the dove figurehead facing forward, a clear symbol of their intent. The black longship drew alongside, its crewmen gripping their axes and spears, their faces grim. A large, imposing man with a braided beard and eyes like flint stood at the helm. "Who are you, stranger?" He boomed, his voice like thunder. "And what business does a dove ship have in these waters?" "I am Theron of Fjordheim," Theron replied, his voice calm and clear, carrying across the water. "And this is the Peace Weaver. I am a trader and a storyteller, seeking only peaceful exchange." He held up a finely carved wooden flute, its smooth surface gleaming in the sun. "I offer music if you would listen." The warrior chieftain, whose name was Hakon, scoffed. "Music? We deal in steel, not songs. What treasures do you carry in your hold, soft-spoken one? Speak truly, or we shall take them by force." "My greatest treasures are the stories I carry, and the friendships I forge," Theron said, his gaze unwavering. "My hold contains only honest goods, wool, honey, and carved wood. No gold, no silver, for those are not the riches I seek." Hakon studied him, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had expected fear, perhaps defiance, but not this quiet, unyielding calm. "You speak boldly for a man without a sword," he said, a hint of grudging respect in his tone. "A gentle tongue can often open doors that a sword cannot," Theron replied. "Consider, chieftain, the bounty that comes from peaceful trade. Goods exchanged freely, stories shared, knowledge gained. Is that not a greater victory than any raid?" Hakon remained silent for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over the Peace Weaver, noting its lack of weaponry, its peaceful symbols. He looked back at Theron, who stood calmly, his hands open and empty. Finally, he gave a curt nod to his men. "Stand down," he commanded. To Theron, he said, "You are a fool or a madman, Theron of Fjordheim. But you are also a curiosity. We shall let you pass. But do not think to bring your soft ways into our lands again." "I bring only what is offered freely," Theron said, bowing his head slightly. "And I wish you peace on your journey, Chieftain Hakon." As the black longship turned and disappeared back into the inlet, Theron let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It had been a close call, but his unwavering commitment to peace had, once again, prevailed. He understood that not everyone would embrace his philosophy, but he would never abandon it. His journey then led him to a more remote region, a place of ancient forests and mist-shrouded hills, where a reclusive elder was said to dwell. This was the land of the Silent Folk, a small community known for their deep connection to nature and their suspicion of outsiders. They rarely spoke, communicating mostly through gestures and subtle sounds. Theron anchored the Peace Weaver in a secluded inlet and ventured inland alone, guided by faint trails and the instincts he had honed over his travels. After a day of quiet trekking, he came upon a small, hidden clearing. In its center sat an old woman, her face deeply lined, her eyes the color of ancient moss. She was weaving a basket from reeds, her movements slow and deliberate. She did not look up as Theron approached, yet he knew she was aware of his presence. He sat down a respectful distance away, not speaking, simply observing. He watched the intricate dance of her fingers, the way she coaxed the reeds into shape. The silence was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the gentle creak of the weaving. Hours passed. Theron did not try to force conversation. He simply sat, breathing in the scent of damp earth and pine, allowing the stillness to settle over him. He pulled out his bone flute and played a soft, wordless melody, a tune that spoke of the forest and the quiet flow of water. Finally, as dusk began to paint the sky in soft hues, the old woman paused her weaving. She looked at Theron, her eyes piercing yet calm. She held out a small, perfectly woven bird made of reeds. Theron understood. It was a gift, a gesture of acceptance. He took it gently. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice soft, respecting the quietude. "I am Theron of Fjordheim. I come to learn if you would teach." The elder, whose name was Solveig, finally spoke, her voice a dry whisper like rustling leaves. "You listen with your heart, not just your ears. That is rare." Over the next few days, Theron learned from Solveig and the Silent Folk. They taught him how to listen to the forest, how to understand the language of the birds and the whispers of the wind. He learned about their medicinal herbs, their methods of silent hunting, and their deep reverence for the cycles of nature. He shared his own quiet observations of the sea, the patterns of the tides, and the wisdom of the stars. He left them with a supply of his strong, warm wool, which they valued for their simple garments, and they gave him a collection of dried herbs, potent and fragrant, for healing and calming. His encounter with the Silent Folk reinforced Theron's belief in the power of patience, respect, and the quiet understanding that transcends words. He had not traded much in the conventional sense, but he had gained something far more valuable, a deeper connection to the natural world and a profound lesson in the art of listening. Theron's core mission, beyond simple trade, was the sharing and learning of stories. He believed that tales were the threads that wove humanity together, bridging distances and understanding. In every settlement, whether bustling or secluded, he sought out the elders, the children, and anyone willing to listen or share. He would often gather people around a crackling fire in the evenings, the flickering light dancing on their faces. His stories were never of bloodshed or conquest. Instead, he told of the resilience of the ancient trees, the wisdom of the migrating birds, the silent strength of the mountains, and the endless, comforting rhythm of the ocean. He spoke of the gentle giants who shaped the land in times long past, not with thunderous blows, but with soft touches. He recounted tales of clever animals, of friendships forged across divides, and of the quiet courage found in everyday life. In a village called Stonehaven, known for its skilled stonemasons, Theron shared a story of a river that carved its path through solid rock not through force, but through persistent, gentle flow. The stonemasons, who understood the power of patience, listened intently, finding a new appreciation for their craft. In return, they showed Theron how to find the most resonant stones for his flute, and he learned to play melodies that echoed the deep, resonant hum of the earth. In another settlement, a bustling market town named Port Reach, Theron found a diverse crowd of merchants and travelers. Here, he shared riddles and ancient proverbs, inviting others to share their own. He listened to tales of distant lands, of strange customs and wondrous sights. He learned a new knot for securing sails from a seasoned sailor and a recipe for preserving berries from a traveling merchant. The exchange was vibrant, yet Theron's calm demeanor ensured it remained peaceful, a hub of shared knowledge rather than competitive haggling. He always made sure to listen more than he spoke. He believed that every person carried a unique story, a piece of the world's vast tapestry, and that true wisdom lay in gathering these fragments. He learned of local deities, of unique superstitions, and of the small, everyday joys and sorrows that bound communities together. He never judged, only absorbed, his mind a quiet vessel for the richness of human experience. One day, in a small coastal village named Seabreeze, Theron met an old woman, her eyes twinkling with mischief, who claimed to be a dream weaver. She didn't literally weave dreams, but she told stories that were so vivid and comforting. They were said to guide listeners into peaceful sleep. Theron spent an entire evening listening to her tales of moonlit gardens and gentle sea creatures, and he recognized a kindred spirit. He shared his own lullabies and quiet narratives, and they spent hours exchanging techniques, their voices a soft duet in the twilight. The villagers of Seabreeze, accustomed to boisterous entertainment, found themselves surprisingly soothed by their quiet storytelling sessions. They discovered a new appreciation for the power of a gentle voice and a calming narrative. When Theron departed, the Dreamweaver gave him a small pouch filled with dried lavender and chamomile, herbs known for their calming properties. "May your journeys always be filled with peaceful dreams, Theron," she whispered. Even for a gentle voyager like Theron, the northern seas presented their own challenges. One particular journey, as he sailed between the rugged coast of the Wolf's Teeth Mountains and the open expanse of the Great Blue, a sudden, fierce storm descended. The sky turned a bruised purple, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the waves rose like angry giants, threatening to swallow the Peaceweaver whole. Arvid, his young crewman, looked terrified, his knuckles white as he gripped the mast. "We will be lost, Theron," he cried over the roar of the wind. "The sea will claim us." Theron, though his heart pounded, remained outwardly calm. He had faced smaller storms before, and he knew that panic was the greatest enemy. "Hold fast, Arvid," he shouted, his voice steady despite the gale. "The Peaceweaver is strong, and the sea, though fierce, will eventually tire." He worked tirelessly, his movements precise and efficient. He lowered the mainsail, leaving only a small storm sail to steady the ship. He lashed down everything on deck, securing the precious cargo in the hold. He gripped the helm, his body swaying with the violent pitching of the ship, his eyes fixed on the chaotic horizon. He didn't fight the storm with brute force, but with skill and resilience, allowing the ship to ride the waves rather than battle against them. He spoke to Arvid in a calm, reassuring tone, giving him clear instructions, guiding him through the necessary tasks. Through the long, terrifying night, Theron hummed a low, steady tune, a sea shanty his father had taught him, not of battle, but of endurance. It was a small anchor of calm in the midst of the tempest. He watched the stars when they briefly broke through the churning clouds, using their fleeting glimpses to maintain his bearing. By dawn, the storm began to abate. The wind softened to a mournful sigh, the waves subsided into a powerful swell, and the bruised sky slowly lightened to a pale gray. The Peace Weaver, though battered and soaked, was intact. Arvid, exhausted but safe, looked at Theron with awe. "You saved us, Theron," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "No," Theron replied, a weary smile touching his lips. "The Peace Weaver saved us, and the sea, in its own time, decided to let us pass. We simply endured." This experience, though harrowing, deepened Theron's resolve. It showed him that true strength lay not in dominance, but in resilience, in the ability to bend without breaking, to flow with the unyielding forces of nature rather than resist them. It also taught Arvid a profound lesson about calm in the face of chaos, a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. There were also smaller challenges, misunderstandings that could easily escalate into conflict. In one instance, Theron arrived at a small, isolated village called Stonefall, nestled at the base of a towering cliff. The villagers, seeing a longship, immediately assumed he was a raider. They gathered on the shore, armed with farming tools and hunting spears, their faces etched with suspicion. Theron, seeing their fear, did not approach directly. He anchored the Peace Weaver a good distance from the shore and, once again, rowed his small dinghy alone. He left his satchel on the boat, showing his empty hands. As he reached the shallows, he sat down on the sand, cross-legged, and began to play his bone flute. The melody was simple, mournful, and deeply peaceful, a tune that spoke of longing and quiet hope. The villagers, initially tense, slowly lowered their makeshift weapons. The music seemed to seep into the very air, calming their agitated spirits. After a long while, an old woman, her face kind but cautious, approached him. "Why do you play such a song, stranger?" she asked, her voice raspy. "It is a song of peace," Theron replied, lowering his flute. "A song to soothe troubled hearts. I am Theron of Fjordheim, and I come not to take, but to share. I have warm wool for your cold winters, and honey for your children. And I have stories, if you would hear them." The old woman, whose name was Sigrid, looked into his eyes, searching for deceit, but finding only sincerity. She nodded slowly. "Come, then, Theron of Fjordheim. Share your stories. We have heard enough of war." Theron spent his time in Stonefall sharing tales of distant lands, of the beauty of the sea, and of the simple joys of life. He helped them mend their fishing nets, showing them a stronger knot he had learned from the fishermen of Oakhaven. He listened to their worries about the harsh winters and their hopes for a bountiful harvest. He left them with not only goods, but also a sense of renewed hope and a belief that not all outsiders were to be feared. After many months of gentle voyages, the Peace Weaver turned its prow homeward. Theron had sailed far, seen much, and learned even more. The return journey was not a race, but a slow, contemplative passage, a chance to revisit the places he had touched and to witness the quiet ripple effects of his peaceful approach. He stopped again at Greenmeadow, the farming hamlet. As the Peace Weaver sailed up the river estuary, he saw Gudrun, the farmer, working in her fields. She looked up, and a wide smile spread across her face. She waved, a genuine warmth in her gesture. When he reached the village, he found that the young boy he had taught to play the flute was now playing for the entire hamlet, his melodies echoing the very tunes Theron had shared. The dried flower Gudrun had given him, now pressed and carried in his satchel, felt like a symbol of the enduring peace he had brought. In Oakhaven, the fishing village, Ragnar, the burly fisherman, greeted him like a long-lost brother. "Theron," he boomed, clapping him on the back. "You return. The fish hook you gave me has brought us the greatest catches this season." And old Finn, he speaks of your sea stories still, says they bring him peace in his sleep. The villagers had begun to trade with other peaceful ships, inspired by Theron's example, and the small harbor felt more vibrant, less wary. Even in the Misty Isles, where Alara, the elder of Ethelgard, greeted him with a quiet smile, he saw subtle changes. The children seemed a little less shy, more open to strangers. The iridescent shells he had traded for were now incorporated into their homes in new, beautiful ways, a testament to the exchange of ideas. Alara told him, "Your spirit, Theron, lingers here like the gentle mist. It reminds us that peace is always possible." Theron reflected on these encounters. He hadn't conquered lands or amassed fortunes. He hadn't won battles or claimed glory. But he had woven connections, shared kindness, and fostered understanding. He had shown that a different path was possible, a path of mutual respect and shared humanity. The true wealth he carried was not in his hold, but in the stories he had collected, the lessons he had learned, and the quiet satisfaction of having made the world a little softer, a little more peaceful. Finally, after many moons, the familiar outlines of the mountains surrounding Fjordheim appeared on the horizon. The Peace Weaver, its blue sails weathered but strong, glided into the fjord, its dove prow leading the way. The people of Fjordheim gathered on the shore, their faces alight with relief and curiosity. Theron stepped onto the familiar land, his heart full. His uncle Kale, his face softer than Theron had ever seen it, embraced him warmly. "You return, Theron," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. What have you brought back from your travels?" Theron smiled, a deep, contented smile. "I have brought back stories, Uncle," he said, gesturing to the sea. "Stories of gentle people, of shared wisdom, and of the quiet strength of peace. I have brought back the understanding that our world is vast and beautiful, and that friendship is the greatest treasure of all." He spent the following days recounting his journeys to the people of Fjordheim. He told them of the mist-shrouded serenity of Ethelgard, the resilient spirit of Oakhaven, the grounded wisdom of Greenmeadow, and the profound silence of the Silent Folk. He spoke of the challenges he faced, the storm at sea, the suspicious warriors, and how he navigated them not with force, but with patience and understanding. The people of Fjordheim listened, captivated. They had always been a peace-loving folk, but Theron's voyages gave them a new perspective, a tangible proof that their gentle ways could extend beyond their fjord. They saw the calm in his eyes, the quiet confidence in his bearing, and the genuine warmth in his stories. Theron continued his gentle voyages in the years that followed. The Peace Weaver became a familiar sight along the northern coasts, a symbol of hope and peaceful exchange. Other villages, hearing of his reputation, began to send their own small, unarmed trading ships, inspired by his example. The network of peace slowly expanded, one gentle oar stroke at a time. Theron never sought fame or power. He lived a quiet life, always returning to Fjordheim, always sharing his experiences, always encouraging understanding over conflict. His legacy was not etched in stone monuments or sung in boisterous sagas of war, but whispered in the rustling leaves of the forests, carried on the gentle currents of the fjords, and hummed in the quiet dreams of those who had heard his tales. And so, Theron, the Viking with the gentle oar, continued to sail, his longship a vessel of peace, his heart a beacon of kindness, reminding all who met him that even in a world of fierce warriors, the greatest strength often lay in the quiet power of a gentle soul. His story became a lullaby for the North, a tale to soothe restless minds, and a quiet promise of peace for all who listened.